Let's see, I have nobody in the public room right now. You just came back in. Ah, there's Phil again. Okay, there you go. And then promote the panelists. Okay. Okay, we got Phil now.
Catherine is having a hard time logging in, so why don't I email with her while we get started?
All right, the State Bar. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, remote members of the committee must be visible on camera unless such an appearance would be technologically impracticable. If so, the member shall announce the reasons for their non-appearance during the roll call. Remote members must also disclose any individuals 18 years or older in the room with them. I think Michelle is helping Catherine. So is there someone who could do roll call? Or Michelle, maybe you're available to do roll call.
I'm available.
Okay.
James Hiding.
Here.
Lisa Johnson.
Here.
Tracy Lesage.
Here.
Deirdre Wynn. Philip Spiegel.
Here.
Elise Yenny. Catherine Young. Heather Benton.
Here.
So we have 5 of our 8 members right now, which is a quorum.
Great. All right. Next on the agenda is call for public comment. Before we begin the public comment, I would like to remind everyone that under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, public comments must pertain to items that are on the agenda or be related to matters that are within the jurisdiction of this agency. Specifically, the LAP Oversight Committee exercises oversight on the Lawyers Assistance Program. The LAP Oversight Committee does not have authority over attorney discipline, and there are no attorney discipline matters on the agenda for today's meeting. State Bar staff will attempt to call members of the public first in the order that they signed up to provide public comment, and if no one signed up, then in the order they appear in the attendee pool. Matt? Do we have any?
See, Kathy Scher. Let's see here. Let's see, for those who are participating by
think-
Zoom video.
Is Kathy Scher a member of the public or a State Bar? No.
She's State Bar
Staff.
person.
She's State Bar staff? Okay. For those who are participating by Zoom video, you should have a function for virtually raising your hand. It is a hand icon and should appear at the bottom center of your screen. If you wish to address the committee, please click on the hand icon now, and the State Bar staff will call on you in the order the hands are raised. For those who are participating by phone, you may virtually raise your hand by pressing *9, that is the start key, then the number 9. Again, doing so will alert staff that you would like to make a comment, and State Bar staff will call on you and open your microphone so that you can address the committee. Due to time restrictions, we cannot allow more than 3 minutes for each speaker. Please note that staff will have an on-screen countdown timer visible to all attendees during the duration of your public comment. The timer's 3-minute countdown will begin as soon as you start your comment, and you will be verbally alerted once you have 30 seconds remaining. The on-screen timer will flash throughout the final 10 seconds. Okay. And let's see. Okay. Kathy. And
Do you see any members of the public who wish to speak?
I believe who's no one from the public now.
There's no raised hands that I see either.
Is this,
Um,
yeah.
I will say, since we did just take the role, that Catherine Young is now present.
And it looks
Right.
like we do have one attendee, Kathy Schur. She's just joining. She's not a panelist.
And staff, I believe, and did not raise hand. So there are no members of the public who have indicated they would like to give public comment.
Great. All right, so chair's report. Well, this is Phil's last meeting. It's very sad. He's been very instrumental in supporting LAPOC, as well as giving insight and thoughtful commentary, and as well as expertise into the medical field and psychiatric and substance abuse recovery. So Phil, we thank you for your service. We bid you farewell. And, do you have any parting comments that you would like to say?
Yes, always remember, old age and treachery will overcome youth and skill. I worked with a fellow by the name of Buzz Hamilton many years ago, who was involved in Pasadena social services. And he used to say that with the fullness of time, things have a way of working themselves out. And I think we need to always remember that there's always hope for the future. I've enjoyed being involved in this committee. I've been on the committee for many years, started as one of the panelists when we were used to have evaluation committees. And I think that the process is wonderful. And I think we've done a lot of good, and I think we'll continue to do so. The lawyer assistance program is a great program. Fortunately, I think Michelle has already talked to a good friend of mine, as a colleague, who his name is Ryan Peterson, and I think he'll be joining the committee. And he has great expertise. He is in the program and has had time in the program, and he does pain management and is an expert in substance abuse issues. And I think he'll be very good on the committee. So I think he'll be well served. And I just want you all to know that I appreciate having had the relationships that I've had with all of you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Is there anybody who would like to comment, say goodbye, anything like that?
This is Jim Hiding. I want to say, Phil, that you've been invaluable, man. We've known each other for a long, long time. And I am so sorry to see you leave. You are a rock for the LAP. You always have been, and your contributions are tremendous, man. So I just really, really appreciate you, and we all should appreciate you for what you've done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
And
yeah, I would second all that. It's, you were here when I joined, and I always looked to you for guidance and appreciated how prepared you were for every meeting. And then your feedback was just invaluable. So you're a rock, as James said, and I'm going to miss you. And, but know that all your attendance at all the meetings made a difference in a lot of lives. So thank you. And don't be a stranger.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Well, again, thank you, Phil. You really will be missed, and Ryan has some big shoes to fill. So, thank you again. But as Phil departs, we also have someone coming on. We have Catherine Young, Dr. Catherine Young, who is a psychologist, also a lawyer. She is practicing at a prison up north. I think she said Soledad, and she's got a passion for this. She got her MFT, went to law school, went to her PhD program, passed the bar while she was in her PhD program, which is just an amazing feat in and of itself. So Catherine, we welcome you. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Well, just want to say that I'm really excited to be a part of the group. I'm so happy to be here with you all, and I'm really excited to dig in and try and catch up to where you all are at. And thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
Yes. Anybody have any welcome they want to give?
I will say welcome. I'm a former public defender. I just retired last year, so it's exciting to hear that the work you're doing at Soledad. I think that's really going to help kind of create, you're like well-rounded on all sides. So you've got every base covered, and I think you're going to enjoy your time here. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I look forward to getting to know you all.
We have a great committee here. All right, staff reports. Next on the agenda is a staff report. This item is being presented by Michelle Harmon and Catherine Ongiri.
Thanks, Heather. I actually don't have anything to report, so I'll pass it on to Kathy.
Okay, it's like, let me get off mute. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Young. It's great to have you on the committee. So lab support has continued to provide outreach through our MCLE programs and our psychoeducation support groups. Since our last meeting in September, we have presented our continuing legal education program 9 times, and we have concluded our ADHD group and began the second round of our bar prep support group. Now, despite some of our staffing challenges that we've had a really successful year, and I'm not going to share too much because later on today you will hear from Ken and all the exciting work that he's been doing, and to get your ideas about what we should continue to do or what we might want to add. So thank you. If are there any questions?
I'm just curious, how many people were in the ADHD group? And maybe Ken is going to talk about it, but I'm just curious.
I don't want to spoil it for Ken because I think it's really exciting, but I'll say in the hundreds. So yeah, so that was that program. Yeah, that he'll tell you all about it and just how excited we are and how about the program success, the things we learned from the programming. So just stay tuned. Thank you for priming everybody to get excited about our ADHD programming though.
It's pretty awesome. Any other questions? Okay, next on the agenda is item 3.1, approval of the September 6, 2024 open session minutes. Are there any corrections or modifications to the open session minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion and a second?
This is Hiding. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, you got it. Phil got it.
All right, so we've got a motion by Jim and a second by Phil. Great. Michelle, would you please call the roll?
James Hiding,
Yes.
Lisa Johnson,
Yes.
Tracy Lesage,
Approve. Yes.
Deirdre Nguyen, absent, Philip Spiegel,
Yes.
Elise Yennes, absent, Catherine Young,
Yes.
Heather Benson.
I'm gonna abstain just because I wasn't at the meeting, so.
Okay, so the motion passes.
Great. All right, so there are no consent items, so we're gonna go ahead and move to the business portion of our agenda. And so next on the agenda is item 5.1, update on the November 2024 Board of Trustees meeting regarding the proposed LAP rule changes and alternative discipline program recommendations. This item will be presented by Michelle Harmon, Melanie Lawrence, and Bridget Graham, although I don't see Bridget on here, so.
It's just going to be me. I'm going to take it.
Okay.
So thank you and good afternoon. Now it's 12:18. So and thank you, Phil, for your service to the Oversight Committee. We will certainly miss you and welcome to Dr. Young. So 2024 was a very busy year for the Oversight Committee, and now we're finally seeing the fruits of that. So in November 2024, at the Board of Trustees meeting, we did present the revisions to the LAP rules that the committee worked diligently on and that went out for public comment in July. There were very few public comments received, and we did present the item and requested the board to approve the rules as amended, and they did in fact do that. So they will be effective January 1st of 2025. So, you know, it really cleaned up the rules and streamlined them to the program that we are today. And really importantly, also moved the financial assistance from a loan to a grant. And so I think that that's really promising for us. So thank you for your work on that. Also related to the alternative discipline program, you all know that you were tasked by the board with looking at the ADP rules as they've existed for many years and evaluate them, considering data and stakeholder feedback on how the program is working. And we did present the committee's recommendations that you adopted in September to the board in November. So what we did after you made your recommendations in September is we took those recommendations and we shared them with each of the stakeholders. So we shared them with OCTC, with State Bar Court, and also with the Association of Disciplinary Defense Counsel for their feedback. We knew that the board would be interested in hearing it. Interestingly enough, ADDC really didn't have any input. They sort of abstained from giving it. And OCTC had a number of comments related to the recommendations, as well as just to many of the rules in general. And the State Bar Court also had important feedback related to the recommendations. So when we presented the item, and hopefully you had an opportunity to review it, we did reflect what the stakeholders' feedback was related to the recommendations. And we crafted the final item with that in mind also. And so what came from it is that the board adopted resolutions that would do a couple of things. One is that the board directed staff to begin collecting basically more information about ADP and ADP participants, about, you know, what is working and what isn't, why people are excluded from ADP, why people are not successful in ADP, and importantly, why there is a higher rate of recidivism in ADP participants than others. We really don't know the answers to those questions, and it's hard to craft rules or a program around this issue when we don't know what the actual problem is. So, you know, there are some challenges to that. How do you what kind of data do you look at to determine why people are recidivating, for example? Those are questions that we're going to be mulling over in the next couple of months. We're going to be working with State Bar Court as well as our data collection team, our mission, actually, I can't remember what they're called, MAD, but I can't remember what it stands for. But they're the data folks from the State Bar, and they're going to be working with us to collect the data to determine what that data is. We may have to actually start collecting it. It's possible that it doesn't even exist now, so that we can, you know, better inform the program in the years coming. So that's one important thing. The other thing is that the board resolved to adopt the committee's recommendation. This is on the moral turpitude issue, to delete moral turpitude, the term moral turpitude from the exclusion. Now, they did not adopt the option that you gave to strike the entirety of that particular rule, which, if you recall, also includes dishonesty or corruption. So those items likely will remain, but they did adopt the idea to delete moral turpitude. And then what they did was they referred the actual rule changes to the State Bar Court bench bar committee. It's a committee run by the State Bar Court. It is made up of the State Bar Court, OCTC, and ADDC. And they will now take the recommendations, the resolution from the board. They also have the full recommendations from the committee. So not just the ones that you voted on, but there were a number of other items as well. So they have all of it. They have their own thoughts as well about some other ways that the rules might change. And so they are going to work on actually crafting the rules. And they are going to then bring them to the Board of Trustees in hopefully early 2025 to be sent out for public comment. So, you know, the work that everyone did was really important, very robust, very thoughtful. And I do think helped to frame the issues for the Board of Trustees. And now they've handed it off to the stakeholders, who I think can mull over some of these other issues, and in the end, with their input and crafting these rules that everybody can be, you know, happy with and think will work, to actually see some changes in those rules for 2025. So, it was an excellent effort on everyone's part. I really appreciate it, and we'll see what happens now in 2025 with the rules. So thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Well, this is Jim Hiding. I just want to say that, you know, the process was very interesting to me, and it was very collaborative with the group here and with the staff. It was very interesting to pass through all of the considerations that we did and then come to the conclusions we did. You know, I was hopeful that some other conclusions would have been made by the BOT, possibly. However, it's good to recognize and realize that the people who are actually being involved with the ADP, the OCTC, the ADD, and the State Bar Courts, along with the Board of Trustees, have gotten involved with this and have gotten an interest in revising the rules so that they make them more realistic, more practical, and more usable. So that's all very, very good. And I really want to tell you, Melanie, I really appreciate your guidance. And Michelle, you know, when we would go a little off track, you put us back on track and let us understand, you know, what the actual purpose was and what we were really doing. We weren't reinventing everything, but we were making suggestions so that the reinvention could come from the people who really work with those things on a daily basis. So it worked out really well, and I really appreciate it. And I wanted to announce that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Melanie for all of her hard work on it, Michelle for all of her hard work. I think this has been not an easy thing to kind of do without you know, ruffling feathers of stakeholders who maybe had different opinions. And I just want to say Melanie handled it extraordinarily well. Don't think I would have done quite as well with it, but I have the utmost respect for you and how you handled it. I think that sending it back to the stakeholders is a wise decision, because then you get their buy-in. So the Board of Trustees was very smart. In terms of the recidivism, I guess my question is, and the data they're asking you to collect, how many years of data are they looking for? What are the parameters of that? Just so we have some clarity about, you know, is this something that's going to go out 2 or 3 years, or is this something where they're asking for 2 or 3 years of back data? I guess I just would like to understand that.
Well, so they had already, they already had some information about recidivism. I think we shared it with the working groups, and we included it in the item in November. And I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I mean, I know it was a period of 5 years from sometime in 2015, 16, 17, around there. And so they need to update it. First of all, they need more current data. They do usually look back at least 3 to 5 years. They're looking for a 3-year window of time of recidivism. So they look at it from a year after the discipline has been imposed, as well as a 3-year marker. So they do have to go back some period of time. So I imagine that they will do that for this year as well.
Any other questions for Melanie? Okay, I think, Michelle, you were not going to present on this, correct?
That's correct. Melanie covered it all. I will point out to Heather, as the chair, that Deirdre Wynn joined the meeting while we were on that item, so I've marked her present.
Thank you. I noticed that as well, so I'm glad you caught that. Welcome, Deirdre. Okay, so next on the agenda is item 5.2, support services report, excuse me, on 2024 activities. This item will be presented by Ken Norse.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to sort of expand on the things that Kathy mentioned towards the beginning of the meeting. Please bear with me. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a presentation sort of allow us to focus on this while I speak. So although I joined the Lawyer Assistance Program in October of last year, I can say that we was able to get a lot done in the last calendar year. As Kathy mentioned, we continued to conduct outreach efforts. There were really sort of 2 different avenues where we did that. One was for 4-credit MCLE presentations. We have 2 standard presentations. One is the impaired colleague presentation, which is to satisfy the prevention and detection competence unit. And we presented 20 of those impaired colleague presentations. In addition to that, we presented 18 wellness presentations, and that's to satisfy the new option for the 1 hour of subfield credit in attorney wellness. We had a total of 2,837 attendees at those MCLEs, and I'll talk a little bit towards the end of the presentation about our thinking for future plans. We also present during the monthly OCTC ethics and CTAP schools. We review services, let people know what resources are available to them, and let them know how to get in contact with us. Through those 2 monthly programs, we reached a total of 560 attendees. So, good number of outreach there. But in addition to that, we also expanded, and I worked a lot this past year on expanding resources available to attorneys, law students, and bar applicants in California. One of my first focuses was the LAP resources page, where we updated and expanded resources on self-assessment tools, wellness articles, videos, and podcasts, as well as support groups. We also focused on our senior attorneys as well, and wanted to make sure that we updated and expanded the rules that were applicable, statutes, ethics opinions, guides, forms, and helpful links. That page had not been updated in quite a while, so we made sure everything was up to date and then also added. And then understanding that especially for our solo and small firm practitioners, one of the major stresses in their lives is actually opening and operating a law practice. As a result, I sort of looked at those resources that were available and updated the rules, statutes, forms, and other practical information that would be relevant, especially to our solo and small firm attorneys in California. But beyond that, I want to talk about a lot of the new programming that we had this past year and that I worked on. First of all, I conducted a mindfulness well-being in week law series. It was actually a 2-month-long series that addressed a really important need that we have in California among our legal community, and that is the high levels of stress, anxiety, and emotional challenges that are inherent in our stressful practice. Mindfulness helps attorneys and others develop better self-awareness, emotional regulation, and resilience. And one of the things that I think is especially strong about this is that it's accessible to anyone, regardless of limitations. And so it was was a good focus. This was the first time we really stressed mindfulness programming within LAP. I held a total of 3 webinars, just an intro to mindfulness in April, just before Wellbeing in Week Law. We also had a Foundations of Mindfulness and Daily Practice for lawyers, as well as a session on merging professional excellence with personal peace. And each of the sessions combined information not only about mindfulness, but really practical exercises as well that we walked through with attendees. We had a total of 40 attendees at those sessions, and it was interesting to note that approximately 85% of those attendees were women. And we're really looking into why that was and how we can expand the reach of this particular program. We did have positive evaluations, and we're determining the best way for 2025 to implement further mindfulness programming. Turning next to our really exciting Refocus ADHD Strategies for Success in Law program, the need was really clear. We have been polling various corners of the legal community to determine what kind of programming would be appropriate, and we did hear from many different perspectives that ADHD-related programming for attorneys would be useful, and the statistics also support this as well. Approximately 4 to 6% of the general population has ADHD, but in law we see, at least double that at 12.5%, according to a 2016 ABA study. I can also say, coming from a law school to the state bar, that law schools currently support significant numbers of students with ADHD through accommodations and other things, and these are our new junior attorneys who are joining our profession. I also connected, when structuring this program, with the 3 bars that are already leading ADHD-related programming. That's New York, Minnesota, and DC. I know that a couple of members of the DC lab did attend 1 or more of our sessions, and I'm looking forward to debriefing with them about that. So the structure of the sessions was a 6-week virtual series. Attorneys, law students, and state bar applicants with ADHD or similar symptoms were permitted to attend. It was actually one of the very first off-cycle all licensee emails that was sent out. Any of you who are California attorneys should have received that. The purpose of this program was to, focus on the issues that ADHD brings, and that's really executive functioning skills that are essential for legal practice. But we didn't want to just focus on sort of the downsides. We also wanted to celebrate the strengths of neurodiverse attorneys, law students, and bar applicants. It was an extremely practical program that talked about ADHD generally, and then it was a 6-week thematic session. So the very first one, for example, was on motivational regulation, and we presented strategies and tools to help people manage motivational regulation. The sessions were led by Lisa Spenlove, who's an MFT, and she's been with the Lawyer Assistance Program as a group leader, I believe, for approximately 20 years. So she brings a great depth of experience. We had an incredible response from the legal community. The limit that we had due to Zoom license was that the 1,350 registration limit was reached within 48 hours, incredibly quickly. And in all, we served 3,509 attendees across those 6 sessions. We had strong satisfaction rates, and 96% of attendees would recommend the program again to others. And then finally, when I first started at the state bar, I was asked to take a look at our bar applicants to see what sort of support services that LAP could provide them. It was really clear to me that there's little or no support in our community for bar retakers, despite the fact, for example, in this past July bar, that 47% of takers did not pass, which meant that if any of these people wanted to become an attorney, they would become a retaker. And so we had an opportunity to extend our wellness, mental health, and study strategy support to this overlooked cohort. And another thing that I really like about the Reset Retaker program is that it does help to expand access to the legal profession, as members of historically marginalized populations are overrepresented among retakers. I decided to structure the program on this 5 1.5-hour virtual sessions, merging wellness, mental health, and study strategies. The sessions were led by Laura Lisby, who's an LCSW, who's also a support group leader here at LAP. And we also invited 3 law school academic success professionals to help us as well. The outcome was very positive. We served 631 attendees across 4 sessions, and we had high satisfaction and support from bar retakers and the law school community. And I'll turn next to what we're sort of thinking about for 2025. So in terms of psychoeducation, we're currently in the process of debriefing the Refocus program and determining next steps. It's not entirely clear that a 6-week session is the best way to deliver all of the content. As part of the surveys that we did during the program, we asked attendees to identify the executive functions that most were impacted by their ADHD. And, it's very possible we could decide to focus on the top executive functioning where people need assistance, and maybe not make it a 6-week program, maybe slightly shorter. I'm currently executing the Reset Bar Retaker Support Program. We had our first session this past Monday on Resilience Reset. And so far we have 735 registrants as of today. And I do anticipate that those numbers will increase in the future. We have great buy-in from the legal community. And I also give updates about this program to the Law School Council, among other oversight committees at the State Bar. And we're also currently planning our 2025 mindfulness programming, again, to determine the best content and format for that. Turning next to our transitional assistance services, we're currently looking into our providing of career counseling and individual therapy sessions and trying to determine the most effective and sustainable support model for those services. And then finally, turning to the MCLEs, we're currently developing the format and content of an updated prevention and detection competency MCLE. I think the one that we have now on Impaired Colleague is wonderful. It does provide a lot of statistics and strategies for dealing with substance use issues and mental health issues. And we're looking to see if there might be other content or another format that might be an appropriate way to present the content. So that completes my presentation. I wanted to see if there were any questions, comments.
I just wanted to add really briefly, Ken, we are, in terms of the MCLE programming that we have done this year, we are also going to be recording it for on-demand sessions, so that people can log into their My State Bar profile and get the credits for prevention and detection or wellness on demand as well. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, how does all the staff get their ideas and collaborate and put things together? If you'd describe that, please.
Absolutely. We're constantly speaking with members of the legal community. We're also turning internally to speak to the probation department, among others, to find out what kinds of issues that they see there. Also internally within LAP, on the mandatory LAP side, we do have quarterly meetings to find out what sort of issues people are seeing, within the members of the legal community who are being served there. In addition to that, I'm in constant contact with other lab programs throughout the country. As I mentioned, the ADHD support group was, the way that I structured it was inspired by the work that other labs have done. And of course, I'm always welcome to any of your input as well, if there are things that you would like to look us into or topics that you think would be especially relevant for the voluntary lab programming.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I like the wellness part of it, is great. And, also including the, retakers of the bar. You seem very thoughtful in making sure to reach out to everyone who could benefit from our services. So sounds very exciting. It was a great presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. I take this work very seriously, and I love being able to be on the helping side of the State Bar, where we can support attorneys, law students, and applicants here.
That's good. That's very good. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is such a, I was taking notes as you were talking and I was like, this is so amazing. And I wish I had paid more attention to my email because I missed the ADHD memo. I confess my ADHD can be very bad at times, particularly when it comes to organization and kind of getting things done. And, you know, that idea of, okay, I've got all these things sitting in front of me now. Where do I start? It gets kind of chaotic. So I think that, you know, 1,350 people, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of attorneys, that's a lot of people to give access to that. And I think, you know, I meet more and more attorneys who suffer from various forms of executive functioning, neurodivergency kind of challenges. And so I think that the opportunity to kind of tackle it from this perspective is really good. I wonder, I had a couple of questions. I think Kathy may have answered my question about it being recorded elsewhere, because I would love to see kind of what you put into it and what your, you know, what this content was. I feel like it would be useful to me. But I guess my first question is, in terms of the ADHD, is there a plan to do another cohort like this? And are you setting it up so it's kind of like people also get an opportunity to collaborate with each other? How did that work? Are there other types of neurodivergency that you're going to address? Maybe people who fall into the ASD spectrum or something like that, who maybe are struggling a little bit with maybe even client interactions. It's a big one for people who have ASD. And then also, is there any thought to making some of this a little bit fee generating so that people can access it, but for a nominal fee, so we're still bringing it in, and then eventually you can increase it. But I feel like sometimes that sounds like that people are very invested, and so given that it's clear they're invested, is there some way we can maybe charge, even if it's 20 bucks or 25 bucks, to get people to participate, which will bring in, I mean, that's like $25,000 right there, so.
Great. So just to address your last point, we absolutely are looking potentially into the way not only to, be able to pay for the program itself through maybe charging a nominal fee, but it also increases buy-in to the program for attendees so that, you know, if you're going to pay your $25, you will be a little more likely to attend the sessions. And so we sort of like it from that perspective. In terms of leading new sessions, we absolutely are considering that. And as I mentioned, we're trying to think about the best way to do that. The 6 weeks was very long and required a large time commitment. Attorneys are very busy. We did want to have this pilot be as interactive as possible. So, you know, we did limit access to the live sessions. However, we are currently building a library of resources that were generated from the presentations, transcripts, and feedback that we got. To think about other areas of neurodiversity, I can say that there were a wide range of comments that were provided in our survey responses. Autism, was one thing that was mentioned. We have not really looked at it yet, but we're always considering other areas that might be fruitful for programming, and neurodiversity is absolutely, within that ambit.
And Ken, if you just want to add about how we're thinking about structuring the ADHD and why we didn't record, well, we recorded everything, but didn't make it publicly available.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very new and innovative programming that's, I think from my research, we're only the 4th state bar to provide any similar programming. We wanted to make sure that we got the content right, the tone of the program, the resources that were, available correct. But we are thinking of, retooling the program rather than having sort of 6 weeks of programming, focusing just on those top 3 areas of executive functioning, with live programming that would be recorded, and then potentially having a library library of recorded sessions for those other 3 executive functions where we know that there's a need within the legal community in California to address them, but they're just not as popular as the other 3. We're also thinking of developing something like a handbook or workbook that might be appropriate. Again, all of this was based on the content that was generated from our 6-week pilot. And we haven't quite decided exactly how the handbook and or workbook would be used, but we just have such a wealth of information now from the PowerPoints, from the transcripts of the programs. And then not only did we do pre-program surveys, but also post-program evaluations. You know, one of the things that really caught me off guard is I expected that we would have large numbers of junior attorneys. We did not ask people's ages, but we did ask how many years they had been practicing. And the majority of people who attended had 15 plus years of practice. So, you know, our thinking is it's probably older attorneys who were not diagnosed when they were younger, now just realizing that they have executive functioning issues, potentially ADHD. By the way, we did not require a formal diagnosis. And so they attended our session, and the light bulbs that were going off in the comments were incredible. I've been practicing for 20 years. I knew that there was something I was constantly having to compensate for. Now I can put my finger on it. And so it was really just really effective, I think, for our community to focus on ADHD programming. So I can't wait to see what we come up with next. But in my mind, really thinking about this 3 weeks of live programming, and then a library of handbook or workbook and other recorded information.
And I'll just add to that, we are also exploring some of the comments that we heard were like, how can we put this in action? How can we work with each other? And like, how do we have kind of like accountability? And they said they didn't want it to be a support group. They wanted it to be an action group, so that people could kind of work through some of these strategies together, or just, you know, have a sense of community with other people who have similar experiences. So we will also be exploring that. That's a little bit more tricky just because of the amount of people who are interested. But we are going, that's also something that we'll be exploring to see if we can add that additional component to really kind of pull everything together and keep the learning going.
I hope that addresses your question.
Absolutely. And I think that your vision for going forward is really beneficial. I think a lot of some of the challenges that people have that cause them to engage in misconduct that's not necessarily of the fraudulent moral turpitude kind is really a function of, you know, disorganization, lack that executive functioning challenges that exist, because it's like, oh, I forgot to turn in that paperwork, and now it's like 3 days late. But you know what? I'm just going to backdate it because because I forgot the deadline, and I don't want to get my client in trouble, and then it becomes a whole thing that spirals out of control. So, yeah, thank you very much. Jim, it looks like you have a question.
I was wondering, with our proactive stance, so when we move into these areas and we offer these programs and we offer help for people, what kind of a contract do we have with the person who's presenting or the person who's leading the program? What kind of liability are we incurring if something should go wrong, or we get, or someone has a bad reaction to something or something like that? What's our independence from that? Do we have a shield there? Are we independent, or are we partners? Do we have independent contracting methods? What's going on there?
I'd like to defer to Kathy about the administrative structure of our contract that we had, for example, with Elisa Spenlove, who is the therapist who led that.
Yeah, so we do have vendor contracts with all of our leaders of the groups. And I think it's really important to note that the people that we use to pick these groups are from our monitoring side, group facilitation groups. And so they are kind of aware of the population, aware of what they should and shouldn't be saying, and of those sorts. But we do have standard contracts that have an indemnification and They have to have certain insurance and things like that. So that would be covered under our contracting process.
Okay, well, I like the idea of being proactive and to the enveloping, welcoming of all people who can benefit from the thing. I just don't know that I want them to think I want them to think it's a state bar sponsored program because I want them to like what we're doing and I want them to feel that we're available for them. But I want to make sure that we're shielded and we're somewhat independent of the provider.
Okay.
And I think that I just want to clarify, is it that the participants are signing an indemnity release, or is it that I guess I'm wondering if there's some sort of like agreement that when people sign up, they can just sort of check a box that they've read it and they understood, and that, there's no, that sort of indemnifies the state bar from, and LAPOC specifically, from liability in certain circumstances. I'm wondering, is that what you were getting at, Jim?
Yeah, I'm sure that our attorneys have reviewed these things very carefully, right? And so I just wanted to be assured that those things were attended to and we were giving attention to those ideas of maintaining that independence and not say this is a state bar sponsored program, or not, put out materials that pat ourselves on the back so much that we'll be the first defendant in line,
Yeah, and so we do, all of our contracts are extensively reviewed by our Office of General Counsel. And so we work with them during that procurement process. In terms of the issue that Heather raised, we don't have the participants necessarily check a box in like with a disclaimer of that sort. That is something that we can look into and talk to our general counsel about if they would recommend us doing something like that. That's a great idea.
Any other feedback for Ken or for Kathy on the support lab side? Well, great job, Kathy. Great job, Ken. This was I got all excited as you were presenting. This is just amazing and exciting. And the fact that people are really invested in it tells us a lot about really the mindset of our legal population right now, which I think is a transition from where it has been of, sort of punitive mindset of this to a, we want to do better, we want to be better, and help us get there. So thank you. Next on the agenda is item 5.3, planning discussion for Lawyer Assistance Program Oversight Committee 2025. So I'll go ahead and kind of start this. One of the things that I've kind of been thinking about is reopening the successful completion work group. I believe that there is room to say either we don't need successful completion and it's individually based, or we need hallmarks of completion for everybody to meet. And that was the big thing that we were kind of struggling with, I think, last time, is what does successful completion look like? And it's very easy to articulate in many ways for sobriety, but then it comes down to the length of sobriety and how active they are. But I wonder if, now that I'm thinking about it, if whether it's better to wait until we get some data on the recidivism to see kind of what are some of the reasons that people are engaging in misconduct again. Is it, a failure to stay sober? Is it a failure to maintain mental health? Or is there something else that they're just altogether, it has to do with their own inability to practice law effectively? But I would like to start that conversation. The other thing that we wanted to talk about are kind of more of a collaboration with the other bar and CLA's Health and Wellness Committee to see how we can better collaborate I think the state bar and CLA have become very siloed. However, there is room for overlap in some things in terms of what LAP does and what CLA does. For example, we have a whole thing on opening and operating a law practice. CLA has written the book on it. You know, they actually have a book. It's really expensive, but they have a book on it. And it's like, how can we collaborate with them to maybe present something that is comprehensive, work with small solo, or because they're the ones that wrote the book. You know, how can we work on the wellness piece? What I was talking to Kathy earlier about, you know, presenting at the annual meeting for CLA. So I'd like to kind of open the door for this conversation of, you know, how can we collaborate better with other affinity organizations? What kind of working groups are we really looking at kind of putting in place right now? I think that, you know, one of the things we talked about, Michelle and I talked about, was whether we need a financial working group, but I think that's been resolved. Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong. So I would like to see kind of what are some of the things that you guys are thinking about that are on your minds, that are things that we should, as a committee, address. I'd like to see us continue to be a working committee and a collaborative committee, as opposed to sort of just meeting and not engaging in the same way. So.
And Heather, I will add that from kind of the Office of Professional Competence side, we are thinking about ways to collaborate more with CLA, especially in the law office management arena. I mean, it does touch LAP, but it also just touches our general kind of education programs. I'm happy to report that Ken is going to be on CLA's Wellness Committee, so that is going to also open up opportunities for collaboration on that. And Ken is also going to be working on some law office management stuff. So we would love any suggestions that you have in this area and just how we can kind of support our practitioners who don't have the traditional support of a big law firm or something like that.
So I'd actually like to pull the attorneys on the committee. So I think that would be Tracy and Jim. Deidre, I'm not sure if you're an attorney, but where did you guys practice? Tracy, I know you were at the PD's office. Jim, where were you?
All private civil.
Okay, are you at a big firm or a small firm?
We have 15 lawyers now.
Okay, so medium size, sort of small. Deidre, are you an attorney? What is your, no, okay.
I'm not an attorney.
Okay. So I think that's a great point in terms of office management, and for those who maybe don't have the support of a big firm. I have been in a variety of practice areas, including my own practice. And I will tell you, it is one of the most confounding, complex things. And when you're already disorganized, it just adds to it. And so I think that collaboration with CLA, I can actually put you in touch with one of the people who wrote the book, if you like, Sabrina Green. She's a good friend of mine. And just that collaboration is really important, but I'd like to see what anybody else thinks about that.
I think that the evolution is pretty remarkable right now. The enthusiasm for actually helping lawyers that I've heard today, you know, with the different programs and the different approaches is a change in direction from what the state bar historically has been over the last couple of decades. And so, the split when it came, and we had the CLA and the state bar. The CLA was the organization that really was the organization that cared about lawyers and wanted to help lawyers and provided the continuing education and did the things that you're talking about with supporting lawyers and in their mental health. They've come up with the wellness ideals, you know, that they've really advanced over this last couple of years. And so the idea of collaborating with them is really a remarkable thing. I mean, it's really good. It's really good. I don't know. I'm a little confused as to how it works now with the bodies changing as they are. They're readjusting, which is a good thing to me. You know, I've always thought that, you know, we can help more lawyers by actually helping them than by, you know, throwing them out on and kicking them to the curb. So, you know, I look forward to that. I just don't know how it looks, how it ultimately works, and how we don't step on each other. So as long as we can do that and organize that, maybe liaise between the two bodies, that's good. Heather just passed out from what I said, so I don't know.
Sorry, I was looking for a cough drop. I put a whole bunch in my bag and I don't know where they were. Tracy, you look like you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna agree. My firm as the public defender in Orange County was like 400 lawyers and support staff. And I am still working. I'm solo practitioner now. There was a huge difference, I'm on my own. So I was even commenting to other friends. I didn't realize how good I had it. So, I mean, just copying stuff and the short version is, yes, it's a great idea and I might go.
I do want to chime in a little bit, even though I'm not an attorney. I'm a scientist, but a lot of my friends are attorney in Orange County. And I think this program is very helpful, especially I'm very happy to hear about the ADHD program, because actually one of my attorney friends have experienced that as well. So very happy to have that.
Anybody else?
I will add on to, I think, Heather, what you were saying, what Jim was also saying about not stepping on each other's toes, including the other bar also, I think would be really important. The other bar has a representative that sits on the Health and Wellness Committee with CLA, and obviously we have a other bar representative position specifically created on the LAP Oversight Committee. But I don't know that the perception is out there at all that the three groups work together. I know the other bar refers people to the LAP and we refer people to the other bar. And I think that's a very like micro way of working together. It's not the macro picture reaching more people, and it might be a good idea to not only to prevent the stepping on toes part, but to synergy is the word that's coming to me, which I know is so cheesy, but like to synergize the work that everybody is doing so that we can take what each of those groups are siloed off and working on, us being one of those groups and the LAP, and try and support each other, not duplicate services, and be able to use each other better. And those were the three groups when we, Heather and I and Jim, we had pre-met before this meeting, had talked about if anybody knows of any other group also that would be relevant, we'd be open to it. But it seems like those three in California are the ones who are doing work that might have some overlap and that could work together and complement each other well.
Yeah, and I would say so when I got appointed to CLA, I actually was appointed into the state bar. Back when I was on CYLA, which is now New Lawyer Section. There's a whole history. And I was appointed into the state bar. So I've been into the state bar for a little bit. And then we broke off and we became CLA. And I sat on that board for about 5 years, maybe 4 years. And what I can say is that there was a perception of sort of an us versus them kind of mentality between CLA and the state bar. And that idea of collaboration, I think, was gone for a very long time. I do think it's coming back. For example, I mentioned at the programs committee meeting about working with the LAP program to kind of build programming. I sit on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which I think is a great committee to partner with because it not just deals with diversity and equity, but also that inclusion piece of people who are neurodivergent, who have disabilities, who have things that impact their ability to maybe practice law on a regular basis, the way somebody who is doesn't have a disability is able to, because at the end of the day, ADHD is a disability. People don't want to say it is, but it is. It's a neurodivergent disability. But I think that the and the other bar, I think for many people has been very nebulous. It's sort of like the Batman of bar associations. It's like we know it exists, but nobody knows anything about it. Nobody knows who it is and how to find it. And I think there's been a lot of secrecy around that too. So I think that idea of collaboration, because at the end of the day, CLA, yes, we care for lawyers, but we're also trying to protect the public too. Our mandate's just a little different in how we do it. The state bar, yes, it's to protect the public, but it's also to kind of ensure that lawyers are healthy enough to practice, right? And the other bar is and Jim can talk more about it, is just a place where we can go to recover in a way that is not breaking our anonymity. And we just lost Deidre. That is not breaking our anonymity with the community, because I tell you, I sentenced a mom to AA when I was in children's court. She had to go to AA, and I walked into an AA meeting and she was sitting there, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I didn't want to be there because I did not feel like she could be authentic with the attorney for her child sitting in the room. And so that's where the other bar would have come in very handy had I not seen it as Batman and seen it as, an open place to go. So I do think that I'm wondering if it's worth it to maybe put together a working group to kind of figure out the collaboration piece, to work with staff, both on the support side, primarily, excuse me, on the support side, to kind of ensure that the collaboration happens in a way that is beneficial to all parties. I'm happy to participate on that working group. I think it's really important to kind of get everybody to the table and maybe even say, okay, we're going to do this working group. 2 or 3 committee members, but maybe a CLA liaison and whatever. Because I think that wouldn't violate Bagley-Keene, but I'm not sure, because they're not a committee member. So that's just my thought.
Well, let me just say, I have to leave, but let me say I'll do whatever, I can to support that kind of effort. And I wanted to just close for myself and say, Phil, thank you again. I love you, and you take care of yourself. And Catherine, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, see ya. Gotta go. Bye, everybody.
Okay, so I think we have 2 working groups thus far. We've got the successful completion and benchmarks. We've got collaboration. Is there anybody else, whether on staff or on the committee, who thinks that we need to grab a working group for to kind of tackle?
I was gonna mention something. I don't know if we need a working group, but especially with Phil leaving, Phil and I approved the applications, right? Which was previously the loan for LAP. Now it's a grant. With the criteria in place, we were thinking maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Myself and Phil, or Phil's replacement. So I wanted to just bring that up.
Yes.
I've wondered about that myself.
I can address that. Heather and I actually spoke about that earlier, because that was one of the thoughts, is what we need to do about the financial assistance piece now. And so since, like Bentley was giving the summary of the board passing the changes to the LAP rules, what was in that agenda item that they adopted was making the loan into a grant, and the agenda item included a link to what the financial assistance working group had recommended that this group then voted on to approve specific criteria for the grant, which included a matrix based on federal poverty guidelines for admissions criteria, and then to delegate that decision to the staff. So since this group already made the criteria, we don't really have a need for a working group to double check and make sure people meet the criteria. Staff
That
can just
sounds
do that,
great.
checking a box, right?
Yeah,
So that doesn't go into effect until January 1st. So if there are
Okay.
applications between now and January 1st, we may still need the two of you to look at those applications. But after January 1st, we should be able to administer that grant without a working group looking at
great.
applications.
Are
Sounds
there
great.
sufficient funds to continue the program?
So we're in the process, there are funds to continue the grant program. The amount of that has not been determined yet. We're in the budgeting process for 2025 right now. And so by the end of the year, we'll have that. The expectation is that it shouldn't be very much different from previous years. We'll need, however, to have an amount rather than many years ago when we know that we had our reserves and lap was flush with cash and there was really no people want money, we can prove it if you qualify. We're going to have to set a budget and stick to it. So with what we're expecting, we should still be able to have it be somewhere around this $30,000 mark, which is similar to what we've been giving in loans right now. And it will be a grant. The difference will be as we get towards the end of the year, how thin it's going to get spread. We don't know yet if turning it into a grant will lead to more people wanting to apply for it. Some of it is still up in the air and we'll have to work that out and maybe come back to this group next year with those types of questions.
And I would say one of the things Michelle and I talked about too, in terms of the grants is, do we limit the number of grants and say we will do 10 grants a year, each for up to, $3,000 or whatever? Or do we say, we'll just go case by case, and then knowing that potentially at the end of the year, we may not have enough money, even though there's someone in high need. So that's a conversation to be had. I don't know, Michelle, if we need a working group for that or not, to kind of make that recommendation. But I do think it's important that we kind of make that decision before we start, or as we're starting the grant process, so that we're not running out of funds in February and then nobody can get it. So it seems to be people recover in January a lot. So it's like the month for, it's like sober January, So yeah, that would be my thought on that. And then there's one other, lost my train of thought. That's okay. So I want to make sure that we incorporate everybody on the working groups. So if there's something you're really interested in, I encourage you to volunteer for it, even if you don't have necessarily the experience or whatever. We learn as we go, is what I would say. Is this is very much a, we have experts on the state bar, but we also are an oversight committee for a reason, to help kind of navigate and guide the process. So I would say for the collaboration working group, do I have anybody who wants to volunteer for that aside from me and Jim? I think Jim was the only one. We can have up to 3 on a committee. Any more than 3, and we have to follow Bagley Keene.
I was gonna ask for the successful completion,
Absolutely.
if that's all right.
Yes. Anyone else for successful completion?
Because that's a little closer for me in terms of my skill set, so with prior drug courts and stuff, so.
And I want to, Kathy, it looked like you were going to say something, so I wasn't sure if you had something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on the collaboration front, it might be a little premature for a working group. We are, especially if there's not 3 people, but because Ken and I are working on the back end to figure out maybe what that collaboration looks like. And another group that wasn't mentioned is the CalBAR Connect. They are actually they're looking about where they might fit into this puzzle as well. So we're kind of trying to figure it out on the back end. And I do just really want to acknowledge that, yeah, when we split off, I think everybody was really trying to find their place and not trying to step on each other. But now that we're kind of past that and we have a better kind of understanding of how we can help, like in what respective ways and how we can maybe get together. I think that hopefully that will allow us to be more collaborative. So if you would allow us to work on it a little bit more in terms of collaboration before setting up a working group, I would we could report back to the committee at the next oversight committee meeting, and then maybe at that time, just to try to, just so that we as staff can kind of move a little bit more nimbly before getting the oversight committee involved.
I think that makes sense. My only concern is that it kind of delays things a little bit. And that is my only concern. I think you guys have hit the ground running, and I think keeping the momentum is really important. And so that's my only thought on that is do we establish a working group to kind of help navigate what that looks like? What does the collaboration look like? Who do we need to get involved so that it doesn't all fall to you guys? Because you have a lot of work as this, and I think that if we can kind of put some brains together of people who have a diversity of opinions, to kind of see what that really looks like, even if we only meet once before the next meeting, it might help us to kind of have a plan in place going forward to be able to navigate the next steps so that we can do something. Particularly, and I say this particularly because the CLA annual meeting comes up in September, and it'll come up very fast. So I just want to make sure and the small solo summit is in June. So if we can kind of hit the ground running with that, I think it would be great.
Yeah, I think I think you've convinced me too. I mean, the other thing is that Jim is going to be the person mostly we're talking to for the other bar. So
yeah,
I think that, I definitely defer to your leadership, and thank you for considering the suggestion.
of course. Yeah, I think it's a great point about like letting you do some work on the back end. I think it's just important that we start the collaboration, and I'm happy to kind of serve as a little bit of a liaison with CLA. I've got my hands in like 50 million things there. So, and I can connect with Terrence, who's the chair of the board. So. Is there any other, Lisa, you've been really quiet. Catherine, I know you're new to this. Is there anything that you guys feel like we should address? We need to establish a group for, or do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Well, I know I'm on one committee, and I was working with Tracy, and I'm not sure if we are continuing to work on that committee, or does the new year start a whole new, option? Or
Which committee was that? Do we know?
we were Tracy.
I think
what was
it's,
the name of it?
it's probably moral turpitude.
Right,
Yeah.
about the moral turpitude.
But I think they
the
adopted-
working group.
They adopted one of our suggestions, so I think we're done on that.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. Lisa, is there anything you're interested in that you feel like would be beneficial to the oversight committee to take a look at?
I guess the ADHD group, I could work on.
Okay. So maybe, Kathy, maybe you and Michelle can reach out to Lisa and see if there's any way she can support you guys in that. Yeah. But I do want to make sure everybody kind of gets on a group today. So if you all, so we've got the collaboration. I think right now we'll just probably leave that one at Jim and I, but is there someone else who wants to take on successful completion with Tracy? I mean, I'm happy
I'd
to
be
do it, but I
interested.
think there was someone else. Catherine,
Thank
you
you,
said you
Catherine.
wanted to?
Yeah, Catherine
Oh,
was just
perfect. I
saying
think
that,
that's
and
great. I think
Yeah.
fresh eyes on this, and perhaps Dr. Yenny would still be interested.
Oh, yeah.
right.
Okay, Michelle, am I
Alright, so
missing anything we talked about?
Shall I tell you what I have down for reopening the successful completion and benchmarks working group? We have Tracy, Catherine, and we can contact Dr. Elise Yenny later
Yeah.
and see if she is still interested. And then for the collaboration with other similar stakeholders, Jim and Heather. We'll work on that and contact Lisa for help with the ADHD from a support side when you all are working on that. And did I miss anybody? I think that was,
it.
yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, awesome. Okay, so where are we? All right, well, if there's nothing, excuse me, if there's nothing else, that concludes today's agenda. We did not set a meeting for the next date. I believe it'll be in March sometime. So would you guys like to try to decide on a date now, or is it easier if Michelle or Matt send out a poll to kind of poll us and figure out a date? I think there's a lot of people missing, so I'm thinking a poll is probably better, but.
The poll works great.
Poll works
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. we'll
Okay,
do a poll.
awesome.
Before we go, I would like to recognize and thank Matt for all the fantastic work that he does. And, you know, he's really been over the years of invaluable help to me. As an older guy who's not that computer literate, he's always there to help me out with everything. And he's really great. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
You're here.
Second that.
Great. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and adjourn, and then we will, Matt or Michelle will send out a poll to set our March meeting. I would like to probably do that meeting in person to the extent we can, so.
Okay.
Okay,
No.
Thank
Alrighty.
you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Take care,
Bye.
Phil.
Bye.
Have a good